The warship floated in the void, a relic of an era long past. The Galactic Federation's finest admirals scoffed at its crude, outdated design. It was small, ugly, and painfully slow compared to the sleek, gravity-defying destroyers that filled the Federation's mighty fleets. To them, it was nothing more than a joke, a scrap heap barely worth the fuel it burned. Yet this so-called relic had a name: Indomitable. And Captain Elias Rourke knew that names mattered. The Federation had laughed when humanity first introduced its warship to the galactic stage. Compared to the advanced plasma shields, antimatter warheads, and hyper-precise targeting systems of alien fleets, the Indomitable was archaic. It relied on primitive, brute-force technology, massive tungsten slugs fired at ridiculous speeds, thick armor instead of energy shields, and a crew trained in resilience over automation. They called it inefficient. They called it primitive. They didn't understand. Humanity had spent centuries fighting wars with whatever they had, improvising, adapting, and finding new ways to kill with the crudest of tools. Every empire, every species, had its own doctrine. Some favored energy weapons, others used drones or AI-assisted warfare. But humans? Humans fought dirty. And now, war was coming. The Zelvok Dominion had declared war on the Federation, a brutal species of conquerors who had no use for prisoners or negotiations. Their fleets were vast, their technology terrifying. One by one, Federation worlds burned, their sleek, graceful warships shattered under the relentless advance of the Zelvok. Every battle ended the same way. Federation forces routed, their once mighty fleets reduced to wreckage, their admirals unable to comprehend why their superior technology was failing them. Rourke had watched the reports. He'd seen how the Zelvok exploited weaknesses, how they adapted faster than any species the Federation had ever faced. Their energy-based weapons fried delicate shield systems. Their ships outmaneuvered every automated targeting system. Their fighters disrupted enemy formations with vicious precision. The Federation was losing, and now they were desperate enough to call on the one thing they had mocked. Indomitable had been stationed at a remote outpost, forgotten and neglected. When Rourke got the call to join the war effort, he knew what it meant. They were running out of options. They were throwing everything they had at the enemy, even the ship they had once ridiculed. Fine. Let them laugh. As Indomitable jumped into the contested sector, surrounded by the broken husks of Federation ships, the Zelvok turned their weapons toward it, expecting an easy kill. They had no idea what was coming. The first volley from the Zelvok ships slammed into Indomitable's hull, but there were no shields to short out, no delicate systems to disrupt. The armor held, reinforced with layers of thick, primitive metals that absorbed the impact. Unlike the Federation ships, which relied on sophisticated energy redistribution, Indomitable had been built to take a beating and keep firing. And fire it did. The kinetic cannons roared to life, launching tungsten slugs at speeds so high that even the Zelvok's advanced defense systems couldn't react in time. One enemy destroyer crumpled like a tin can, its hull torn apart as raw kinetic energy shredded through it. Another ship's engines exploded, sending it spiraling into the wreckage of its allies. The Zelvok scrambled, trying to adjust their tactics. But they had never fought anything like this. Indomitable didn't fight like the Federation. It didn't use elegant formations or predictable strategies. It fought the way humans had always fought, ruthlessly, relentlessly, with a brutality that defied logic. The warship they had laughed at was now the only thing standing between them and total annihilation. And Captain Elias Rourke had no intention of letting them win. The Zelvok fleet hesitated for the first time. They had spent years studying the Federation's war doctrines, predictable, precise, and logical. Every Federation ship followed carefully programmed attack patterns. Every fleet engaged with a cold efficiency that was easy to counter. But Indomitable? It was chaos incarnate. The ship's massive railguns fired again, unleashing another barrage of hyper-accelerated slugs. One Zelvok battleship tried to maneuver away, but it was too slow. The first slug punched a hole straight through its hull, leaving a smoking, molten gap where its command center had been. A second slug followed, tearing through its reactor core. In an instant, the ship detonated in a violent explosion, sending debris scattering in all directions. Rourke grinned. "How's that for primitive?" he muttered. The Zelvok adapted quickly, their remaining ships breaking formation, trying to surround Indomitable. Plasma bolts and particle beams rained down, scorching the warship's hull. Unlike Federation ships, which relied on energy shields to absorb incoming fire, Indomitable took every hit head-on, shrugging off attacks like an old battleship from Earth's past wars. "Damage report," Rourke barked. "Armor's holding, Captain," Lieutenant Vega responded, her fingers flying across the control panels. "We've lost a few external sensors, but the hull integrity is still at 92%. "Good," Rourke said. "Keep firing. Aim for their engines. Cripple them before they can run." The gunners complied, unleashing another deadly salvo. One Zelvok cruiser tried to bank away, but a tungsten slug tore through its propulsion system, sending it tumbling helplessly through space. Another ship took a hit to its weapons array, its plasma cannons erupting in a chain reaction that engulfed half its hull. The Federation ships that had survived the initial assault, damaged and barely operational, watched in stunned silence. For years, they had been taught that kinetic weapons were outdated, that brute force had no place in modern warfare. Yet here was Indomitable, proving every tactical expert in the Federation wrong. "Captain Rourke," a voice crackled through the comms. It was Admiral Vren, the highest-ranking Federation officer still alive in the sector. "Your ship, what the hell is that thing?" Rourke smirked. "A warship," he said. "A real one." The Zelvok were in full retreat now, their surviving vessels breaking off and fleeing towards the outer edges of the system. They had underestimated the humans once. They would not make that mistake again. But Rourke wasn't done. "Helm," he ordered. "Pursue and destroy. No survivors." "Aye, Captain," Vega acknowledged. Indomitable's engines roared, propelling it forward with a force that made the deck tremble beneath their feet. Unlike the Federation ships, which relied on delicate energy fields for maneuvering, Indomitable had thrusters built for raw acceleration. The last Zelvok battleship, its hull smoking and its weapons failing, tried to make a final stand. It turned, charging its remaining plasma cannons for one desperate blast. Rourke's lips curled into a wolfish grin. "Fire!" The final kinetic round struck dead center. For a moment there was silence. Then the Zelvok ship exploded in a massive fireball, the shockwave rippling across the battlefield. The last of the Dominion fleet was gone. A deep, stunned silence settled over the comms. Then, slowly, a sound began to rise. Cheers, shouts of victory from the battered Federation crews who had thought this battle was lost. Rourke leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. The battle was over. But the war? It was just beginning. And this time, humanity wasn't going to fight by the Federation's rules. This time, they were going to fight their way. The aftermath of the battle left the battlefield littered with debris, broken Federation ships, charred Zelvok husks, and the lingering radiation of shattered reactors. Indomitable stood among the wreckage, scarred but victorious. Captain Elias Rourke surveyed the tactical screen. The Federation survivors were regrouping, scavenging what they could from the remains. The Zelvok, always arrogant in their superiority, had not expected to lose. This was the first time in the war that they had been outright beaten. The comms crackled to life again. Admiral Vren's voice carried a mix of exhaustion and something Rourke hadn't heard from a Federation officer in a long time. Respect. "Captain Rourke, we owe you our lives." Rourke smirked, but his voice remained cool. "You can thank me when this war is over, Admiral. If we don't change the way we fight, today's victory will mean nothing." There was a long pause. Then Vren sighed. "I won't argue with you. Whatever the Federation's been doing, it clearly hasn't worked." Another pause. "That ship of yours, Indomitable, it fights differently. It thinks differently." "That's because it wasn't designed by committees of bureaucrats," Rourke replied. "It was designed by people who know what war really is." Silence. Then, "We need more ships like yours, Captain." "A lot more." Rourke had expected that. The Federation had dismissed human combat tactics for years, calling them inefficient and barbaric. But now, desperation was setting in. The Federation had always been built on the idea of technological and strategic superiority. But against an enemy like the Zelvok, who adapted, who learned, who exploited weakness, that superiority had crumbled. They needed a new strategy. Number. They needed human strategy. "Admiral," Rourke said, leaning forward, "if you're serious about this, I'm going to need more than a few new ships. I need full control over tactics and deployment. The Federation's way of war doesn't work. You let me fight my way, or we lose this war." Another silence, then a deep exhale. "I'll talk to High Command." Rourke knew what that meant. The bureaucrats would fight it. They wouldn't want to hand over control to some reckless human captain with an outdated warship. But they didn't have a choice. The war had changed. And Rourke was going to make sure humanity led the charge. "Set course for the nearest Federation shipyard," he ordered. "We're going to show them what real warships look like." As Indomitable turned, pushing its way through the wreckage, a single thought burned in Rourke's mind. Let them laugh. They wouldn't be laughing for long. The journey to the Federation shipyard was tense. The remaining Federation ships, battered and humiliated, followed Indomitable in silence. There were no official orders from High Command yet, no declarations of a new strategy, just the whispers spreading through the fleet. Rumors that a single, outdated human warship had turned the tide of battle. Rourke sat in his command chair, watching the hyperspace tunnel streak past on the main display. He knew how this would play out. The Federation had spent centuries building a war machine that was sleek, efficient, and, in their minds, unstoppable. Now that machine was failing, and the people in charge wouldn't want to admit they were wrong. "Captain, incoming transmission from the Federation shipyard," Vega reported. "High Command is demanding an immediate debriefing." Rourke grunted. "Put them through." The holoscreen flickered to life, revealing an aging, sharp-faced man with a uniform that looked like it had never seen a battlefield. Admiral Kaslor, one of the Federation's senior strategists, the type of officer who had spent more time in meetings than in combat. "Captain Rourke," Kaslor began, his tone clipped. "I've read the reports. I'm struggling to understand how your vessel, an outdated human relic, was able to outfight the Zelvok." Rourke leaned forward. "We won because Indomitable wasn't built by a committee that prioritizes aesthetics over survivability." Kaslor's lips tightened. "That ship of yours lacks shields. It lacks energy-based weaponry. It is a brute force design in an age of precision warfare. You're telling me it worked?" "You saw the results, Admiral." Kaslor's expression darkened. "It was a fluke. The Zelvok were unprepared for such primitive tactics. If they adapt—" "They will adapt," Rourke cut in. "That's the whole damn point. They've adapted to every strategy the Federation has thrown at them. That's why you're losing. But what they haven't adapted to is human warfare. Kaslor scoffed. Human warfare? You mean your people's obsession with brutality? Rourke smirked. I mean fighting to win, Admiral. The Federation fights by rules. Humans fight to survive. Kaslor hesitated. He wasn't used to being challenged, but Rourke could see the doubt creeping in. High Command is not ready to embrace this kind of thinking, Kaslor finally said. But given the state of the war, they are willing to consider modifications to our fleet doctrine. Rourke shook his head. Modifications won't cut it. You need an entirely new fleet. You need Indomitable-class warships, ships built for real combat, not for parade formations. You need human captains who understand war for what it really is. Kaslor remained silent for a long moment. Then, finally, I'll take your recommendations to the Council. But understand, Captain, if this backfires, your name will be remembered as the greatest failure in Federation history. Rourke grinned. Or the man who saved it. The transmission cut out. Vega exhaled. Think they'll actually listen? Rourke stared at the empty screen. They don't have a choice. Outside, the shipyard loomed, a massive construction hub where the Federation's finest warships were built. But Rourke wasn't here for their designs. He was here to build something new, something human. And when the Zelvok came back, they wouldn't be facing Federation warships anymore. They'd be facing monsters. The Federation shipyard was a monument to its philosophy. Sleek, pristine, and soulless. Thousands of pristine warships lined the vast docking bays, their hulls reflecting the artificial light in shimmering perfection. To the Federation, these ships represented the pinnacle of advanced warfare. To Rourke, they were little more than fragile glass sculptures waiting to be shattered. As Indomitable approached the docking ring, the crew could feel the weight of hundreds of eyes on them. Fleet personnel, engineers, and officers all stopped to stare at the battered, outdated warship limping into port. They had heard the stories. The ship they had laughed at, the relic they had mocked, had done what their finest fleets could not. Rourke stepped off the boarding ramp, his boots echoing against the metallic flooring as he and his officers made their way toward the command center. Waiting for him was Admiral Kaslor, flanked by several other high-ranking Federation officials. Some wore expressions of curiosity. Others barely concealed disdain. Captain Rourke, Kaslor greeted him, his tone unreadable. Welcome to Zenith Shipyard. You've certainly caused a stir. Rourke smirked. Figured the Federation could use a wake-up call. Kaslor's expression hardened. You've been granted an audience with the War Council. They want to hear your proposals. Rourke's smirk didn't fade. Good. Let's get started. The War Council's chamber was an immense circular room with a massive holographic display at its center. Generals, admirals, and bureaucrats filled the seats, all watching as Rourke stepped forward. A high-ranking official, Chancellor Varys, leaned forward. Captain Rourke, you stand here today not as a hero, but as an anomaly. Your ship, an outdated, inefficient, and crude piece of human engineering, has somehow managed to win a battle where our finest fleets have failed. We want to know how. Rourke folded his arms. Simple. Your fleets rely too much on technology and predictability. The Zelvok know your playbook better than you do. They counter your formations before you even commit to them. They expect you to fight like the Federation. He stepped closer to the hologram, adjusting the display to show the wreckage from the last battle. They didn't expect Indomitable, Rourke continued. They didn't expect a ship that doesn't rely on delicate shield systems, that shrugs off their energy weapons with brute force armor. They didn't expect kinetic weaponry, which bypasses their countermeasures entirely. And they sure as hell didn't expect a crew that fights dirty. He turned back to the Council. The Federation fights like it's playing a chess match. But war isn't chess. War is a brawl. And humans? We brawl better than anyone. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Some of the officials were visibly uncomfortable, others intrigued. Chancellor Vera studied him carefully. "So what do you propose, Captain?" Rourke's grin widened. This was the moment he had been waiting for. "You give me full authority to design a new fleet, indomitable-class warships, ships built with kinetic weapons, thick armor, and human war doctrine. No more of this elegant, fragile nonsense. We fight like warriors, not bureaucrats. We build ships to win." The room exploded into debate. Some officers immediately protested, calling the idea reckless and outdated. Others, particularly those who had survived recent battles, argued in favor of it. Finally, Kaslor raised a hand, silencing the chamber. He looked at Rourke, his gaze sharp. "One ship proving itself in a single battle does not justify an entire shift in doctrine," Kaslor said. "We need proof that your tactics will work on a larger scale, that your brute force approach isn't just a fluke." Rourke nodded. "Then give me a test fleet. 10 ships, no restrictions, no oversight from your committees. Let me show you what humanity can really do." Kaslor glanced at Varys, who exchanged a long look with the other officials. Then the Chancellor spoke. "You'll get 5, she said. "No more." Rourke smirked. 5 will do." As the meeting concluded, Rourke stepped out of the chamber, Vega at his side. "Think they'll actually back us?" she asked. "They don't have a choice," Rourke replied, looking out at the shipyard. "Because the next time the Zelvok attack, we won't just fight them." He clenched his fists. "We'll make them fear us." The shipyard's construction bays, once filled with sleek and delicate Federation cruisers, were now home to something new, something terrifying. Rourke stood on the observation deck, arms crossed as he watched the first of the Indomitable-class warships take shape. They were ugly by Federation standards, thick hulls of reinforced composite alloys, heavy-set designs with no wasted space, and railgun batteries mounted like jagged teeth along their flanks. They weren't built for maneuverability or grace. They were built to kill. Behind him, Admiral Kaslor approached, his face a mask of controlled skepticism. "You got your warships, Captain," Kaslor said. "Now what?" Rourke smirked. "Now we test them the only way that matters, in combat." Kaslor's lips thinned. "We don't have the luxury of time. The Zelvok will return, and when they do, they'll come in force." "Good," Rourke said. "That means we won't have to go looking for them." Kaslor exhaled through his nose. "I don't like this. The Federation has rules, Captain. We don't fight like barbarians." Rourke turned to him, his grin fading. "Then you'd better hope your rules don't get us all killed." Kaslor said nothing. The construction continued at a breakneck pace. The Federation, desperate for results, allocated every available resource to the project. Within weeks, the 5 warships were operational. Each bore the same brutal design as Indomitable. Thick plating, oversized kinetic weapons, and redundant systems that ensured they could take a beating and keep fighting. Rourke handpicked their crews, bringing in humans and battle-hardened Federation officers willing to throw out old doctrine. He drilled them relentlessly, forcing them to unlearn the pristine, careful tactics they had been taught, and embrace something more brutal, more human. When the Zelvok returned, they came with an armada. Over 50 warships, more than enough to wipe out the remaining Federation defenses. Their confidence was absolute. They had won every battle before this. They didn't realize they weren't fighting the same Federation anymore. The new fleet deployed, with Indomitable at the helm. As the enemy ships came into range, the Zelvok transmitted their usual demand for surrender. Rourke responded with a railgun barrage. Tungsten slugs punched through Zelvok hulls like paper, shattering warships in seconds. The enemy scrambled, trying to return fire, but their plasma weapons splashed harmlessly against the reinforced armor of the Indomitable-class ships. The battle wasn't just a victory, it was a slaughter. By the time the last Zelvok ship tried to retreat, only a handful of them remained. Rourke let them go. He wanted survivors. He wanted the Zelvok to spread the word. Humanity wasn't just fighting back. They were winning. Kasler watched the aftermath in stunned silence. "My God," he whispered, "we can actually beat them." Rourke turned to him, eyes cold. "We were always able to. You just didn't have the stomach for it." Kasler swallowed. He knew Rourke was right. The Federation had tried to win the war with rules. Humanity had won with war. And the Zelvok? They had just learned what it meant to fear humans. The Zelvok retreated, their once mighty armada reduced to scattered wreckage drifting through the void. The battlefield was silent, except for the crackling remnants of their shattered ships. The Federation had never seen a victory like this. Overwhelming, brutal, and absolute. But Rourke knew better than to celebrate. On the bridge of Indomitable, the crew stood in stunned silence, the reality of what they had just done sinking in. The Federation had spent years losing battle after battle, watching their worlds burn. Now, in a single engagement, 5 human-designed warships had shattered an invasion force 10 times their size. It wasn't just a victory, it was a message. Vega turned to Rourke, her face unreadable. "They ran. We actually made them run." Rourke nodded. "And that scares them more than losing." The Zelvok had never retreated before. Their entire species thrived on conquest, on domination. They never encountered an enemy that didn't crumble before them. Until now, Kaslor's image flickered onto the holoscreen. For once, the Admiral had no criticisms, no doubts, only the look of a man who had just seen everything he believed in shattered. "You did it," he said, almost in disbelief. "They were slaughtered. They had no chance." "They'll be back," Rourke said flatly, "and next time, they won't underestimate us." Kasler hesitated. The Federation High Council has already seen the battle reports. They're divided. Some want to commission more Indomitable-class ships immediately. Others are concerned. Rourke scoffed. "Concerned about what? Winning?" Kasler exhaled, rubbing his temples. "Concerned that your methods are too brutal, that we risk losing our identity if we embrace human warfare." Rourke's expression darkened. "Our identity? We were losing this war. Our identity was about to be extinction." Kaslor sighed. "I agree with you, but you're dealing with politicians, not soldiers." Rourke clenched his fists. He had seen this before, leaders who refused to accept reality until it was too late. The Federation still didn't understand. But the Zelvok did. Rourke turned to Vega. "Get me a tactical scan of their retreat path." She nodded, working quickly. A red trajectory appeared on the holomap, leading to a system at the edge of contested space. "That's their nearest forward operating base," Vega said. "Heavily fortified, but we could hit it before they reinforce." Kasler's eyes widened. "You're suggesting an attack? We just won a battle, Captain. You want to provoke them further?" "They're already provoked," Rourke said. "Right now they're afraid. If we wait, they'll regroup, adapt, and come back stronger. But if we hit them again, if we keep hitting them, we break them before they recover." Kasler hesitated, but Rourke saw something different in his eyes this time. It wasn't doubt, it was fear, not of the Zelvok, of him. Kasler swallowed. "I'll inform the Council." Rourke turned back to the holographic map, his mind already 3 steps ahead. The Zelvok had just learned to fear humanity. Now, it was time to teach them what true terror felt like. The Zelvok forward base loomed on the holo display, a fortress nestled in the asteroid fields of the Kelrath system. It was a stronghold, a staging ground for their invasions, and the last place they would expect the Federation, no, humans, to strike first. On the bridge of Indomitable, Captain Rourke studied the enemy defenses. Dozens of warships, automated turrets, reinforced stations. A direct assault would be suicide. Good. He thrived on impossible odds. Vega stood beside him, arms crossed. I assume you have a plan that isn't just charge in and start shooting? Rourke smirked. Oh, we're absolutely going to charge in and start shooting, but not the way they expect. Kasler's voice came through the comms, laced with frustration. Captain Rourke, the Federation High Council has not approved this offensive. You're acting without authorization. Rourke barely glanced at the screen. Noted. You could be court-martialed for this, Kasler snapped. Then I guess you'd better hope we win, Rourke replied. Because if we don't, none of this will matter anyway. Kasler's mouth opened to argue, but he hesitated. He wasn't a fool. He knew that every delay, every committee meeting, only gave the Zelvok more time to prepare. And deep down, Rourke knew. The Admiral wanted him to be right. Kasler sighed. You have 5 ships, against an entire Zelvok stronghold. Tell me how you plan to make this work. Rourke's grin widened. Like this. He turned to his crew. Helm, take us in at quarter speed. I want them to see us coming. Vega frowned. You want them to prepare? I want them to get cocky, Rourke corrected. They'll assume we're another foolish Federation force trying a conventional assault. They'll organize their defenses accordingly. Kasler listened in silence as the 5 Indomitable-class warships crawled toward the Zelvok base. As expected, the enemy fleet surged forward, forming a tight, overlapping defensive formation. They were setting up for a standard Federation engagement, expecting precise formations, delicate tactics. They still hadn't learned. Now, Rourke said, full burn. Straight through the asteroid field. The helmsman's eyes widened, but he followed the order. The fleet accelerated, moving erratically through the dense asteroid belt surrounding the stronghold. The Federation never used asteroid fields, too unpredictable, too dangerous for their delicate ships. But Indomitable-class ships weren't delicate. The Zelvok hesitated. Their targeting systems struggled to lock on as massive tungsten slugs bounced off asteroids, ricocheting unpredictably. Enemy ships fired, but plasma bolts struck floating debris instead of their targets. Then, at the last possible moment, fire all railguns, Rourke ordered. The Zelvok never stood a chance. Tungsten slugs, traveling at near relativistic speeds, tore through their warships before they could react. Ships cracked apart, their hulls shredded. Explosions bloomed in the void as Zelvok vessels turned to run. But Rourke wasn't here to let them escape. Pursue and eliminate, he said coldly. No survivors. The Federation had spent this war retreating, defending, surviving. Rourke was here to end it. The battle was over in minutes. The fortress, once an impenetrable bastion, lay in ruins. Every Zelvok ship was destroyed, every defense obliterated. For the first time in history, the Zelvok had lost more than just a battle. They had lost their fearlessness. Kasler's voice came through the comms, quiet and shaken. My God, you actually did it! Rourke exhaled. And this is just the beginning. He turned to Vega. Prepare a message. We're broadcasting this to every Federation world, every human world. She nodded. What do you want it to say? Rourke's eyes burned with something dangerous. Tell them we're taking the war to the Zelvok. Tell them it's time to stop running. He stepped forward, looking out at the burning wreckage. And tell them humanity just took its first step toward dominating the stars. The message spread like wildfire. Across the Federation, across every human world, across every battle-scarred colony that had been told to cower in fear. Rourke's words ignited something that had long been buried beneath layers of bureaucracy and defeat. Hope. Not the passive, fragile kind the Federation clung to. The kind that hoped the enemy might show mercy, that prayed for a peace that would never come. Number this was something raw, something human, a hunger for revenge. On the bridge of Indomitable, Rourke watched the reports come in. The reaction was immediate. Human officers in the Federation fleet, long frustrated by the cowardice of their commanders, were requesting transfers to his ships. Engineers were already modifying existing warships, stripping away the delicate, failing systems in favor of brutal, human-designed firepower. Civilian shipyards were converting freighters into makeshift battleships. The Federation, as Rourke knew it, was already dead. And from its ashes, a human war machine was rising. "Captain," Vega called from the comms station, her voice sharp. "We've got incoming transmissions, multiple sources." Rourke nodded. "Patch them through." The main holoscreen flickered to life. Chancellor Varys appeared first, her expression unreadable. Next to her was Caslor, his jaw set, his posture stiff. Varys spoke first. "Captain Rourke, do you have any idea what you've done?" He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "Yeah, I just turned the tide of this war." Her eyes narrowed. "You defied direct orders. You launched an unsanctioned attack on a Zelvok stronghold. You broadcast unauthorized messages across the Federation. And now we have protests, riots, military units refusing orders." "Because they know the truth," Rourke interrupted. "Your war was lost until I changed the way we fought. The Federation's been losing for years because it refused to face reality. But now..." He gestured at the holo display, where images of humans rallying to his call flickered across the screen. "Now, we're finally fighting to win." Caslor spoke next, his voice carefully measured. "The Council is divided. Many of them see the necessity of your actions, but others fear what you're becoming." Rourke smirked. "And what do you think, Admiral?" Caslor hesitated. Then, for the first time, he dropped the mask. "I think you're the only reason we're still alive." Varys shot him a sharp look but said nothing. Instead, she exhaled and leaned forward. "The Council will never approve full-scale war on the Zelvok. They still want peace. They need peace." "Peace?" Rourke scoffed. "The Zelvok don't do peace. They either conquer or destroy. You know what they'll do if they win this war. You know what happens to every species they've ever beaten." Varys didn't argue. She knew he was right. "So," Rourke continued, "here's how this is going to go. You're going to give me full authority over every human-led military unit in this war. You're going to approve the expansion of the Indomitable-class fleet, and you're going to let me do what needs to be done." Caslor let out a slow breath. "And if we don't?" Rourke's eyes were cold. "Then I do it anyway." Silence. Varys studied him carefully. "You're not just trying to win this war, are you?" Rourke leaned forward, his voice calm, his words sharp as a knife. "I'm trying to make sure humanity never has to fight for its survival again." Varys closed her eyes for a moment. Then, when she opened them, she looked at Caslor and nodded. "Do what you have to do, Captain." The transmission cut out. Vega exhaled. "We just took control of the entire human war effort." Rourke stared at the holomap, his mind already turning. The Zelvok were reeling, but they wouldn't stay that way. Their empire stretched across dozens of systems, their war machine still vast. But now, so was his. "Good," he said. "Then let's get to work." Because this wasn't just about beating the Zelvok. This was about sending a message to the entire galaxy. a message written in fire, steel, and blood. Humanity would never be underestimated again. The war didn't end with one battle, nor even a dozen. The Zelvok were wounded, but they were not broken. Not yet. But humanity had changed. Under Rourke's command, the Federation's human forces abandoned the old doctrines and embraced something new, something brutal. The Indomitable-class warships became the backbone of a relentless, unstoppable offensive. No longer did humans fight for survival. Now, they fought for domination. One by one, Zelvok's strongholds fell. Their fleets, once considered invincible, shattered under the relentless barrage of kinetic firepower. They tried to adapt, but the humans were always a step ahead. Every time the Zelvok developed a countermeasure, Rourke and his forces changed the game again. Gone were the predictable, delicate battles of the old Federation. Now, war was fought the human way. Entire Zelvok systems burned. Planets they had once ruled with iron fists now lay in ruins, their people forced to flee before the relentless tide of human vengeance. For the first time in their history, the Zelvok were not the conquerors. They were the conquered. And when the war finally reached their homeworld, when Rourke's fleet surrounded the Zelvok capital and prepared for the final strike, the once mighty species begged for peace. But humanity remembered. They remembered the colonies that had burned. They remembered the families slaughtered. They remembered what it was like to be seen as weak, as prey.